Today, we get to take on another big question, which is, do we really need to keep doing, I guess, or start doing digital ministry? Tony.
I don't even know where to go from there, Amy, but you're right. This is definitely a most asked question, even now. For those of you whose churches truly made a shift during the pandemic to create a digital ministry strategy and staff it during the early part of the pandemic, you can just skip this week's episode. No, I'm only kidding. You still need to listen. And you do need to listen because joining us today for this conversation is Tiffany Deluccia. And Tiffany, well, her main job title is Sales and Marketing Director for the Unstuck Group, but she is also our digital strategist.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
So, Tiffany, let's start with the big question. Do large churches really need to keep going with digital strategy?
The short answer is yes, absolutely. The more nuanced answer is yes, but only if you commit to understanding why and getting better. I think bad digital strategies can be like bad billboards, really effective at destroying your credibility with people in your community. So even though the answer is yes, we've got to get better. So that's my first thought in answering that question. On the flip side, I think there's an easy way out when people try to turn it into a theological argument. I hear things like, we don't believe people should spend so much time on social media, so we're not going to be on social media. Or we don't do online because we believe ministry happens in person. And I think we have to be honest. You're not going to influence how much time people spend on social media by just not being there. You're not going to influence how likely they are to come to in-person gatherings by taking that position. So it's really relinquishing our opportunity for influence. And as much as it's, I don't know, it seems harsh, but I think it's a cop-out. And the bottom line is that it's about our mission field. So if there's a pastor out there who can tell me honestly that the people he or she is trying to reach in their community, in the place where God's placed your church, do not use smartphones or iPads or social media or Google, then they can completely ignore this topic.
You and Tony are two peas in a pod.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. So for the church that tried and rode that up and down wave of feeling like digital ministries were worth their time and then weren't and then got burnt out, what do they do now, Tiffany?
I think now is a really good time to go back to the basics. And anyone who's read anything I've published for the Unstuck Group before probably knows where this is going. But a good strategist always starts with moving the starting point towards clear and simple. I think if you can imagine creating a folder in your mind right now for everything you felt forced to do during COVID or cajoled into by a Gen Z worship pastor on your team, even the things you heard from us that you tried to execute on your own and felt like it failed, just clear that desktop in your brain, dump everything into a folder called Pandemic, and let's start fresh. And ultimately, I think that digital ministry strategy can't be an addition to your real ministry methods. You've got to dig all the way down to the foundation of your ministry and start answering these key questions. I used to work at a marketing communications firm, and anytime we signed on with a new client, we start with these basic questions. You can't develop any kind of communications plan, strategy. It doesn't matter what the methods are if you don't answer these questions first. So who are you trying to reach? How are you reaching them now? What's already working for you? Like what's driving growth where you're seeing it? If you're losing people, why are they leaving? What are they choosing instead? Who is your competition? And that's not other churches. How is culture attempting to meet the needs that only God and the local church can truly meet? How are you perceived in your community? And is that perception true, or do you need to change it? What are your goals for trying a new strategy? How will you know you're winning? And who does what on your team? And they sound really big picture, not related necessarily to digital strategy specifically, but it's because they are. Strategy doesn't exist in a vacuum. It responds to objectives. And I think that's where a lot of the missteps I saw and I'm still seeing in digital strategy with churches seems to be. It's like we're just putting things out there. They're not responding to specific objectives. And if there's an objective, it's probably this one. Let's say all you're trying to do as a church is to get people to come back on Sundays. I sure hope that's not all you're trying to do, but if it were, how could you use digital strategy to help meet that objective? just putting the full service online every week is probably the last thing I would try if that were my only objective. And that seems to be the
Right.
baseline for what people are doing right now. So if you know what you're trying to do, then you can decide what digital strategies and non-digital ones can help solve problems and meet an objective. But if you don't know what you're trying to do, I mean, I would pause all proactive digital strategies and get clear on that first. Otherwise, you're in that camp of you could be harming your message. You could be counterproductive to what you're trying to do with digital if you're not careful. Everything you put online should have a purpose, and that's helping the people you're trying to reach take the steps you're trying to help them take.
Let me just jump in, Tiffany. I think that's so wise. Not You're encouraging churches to ask those key questions and develop strategies, but even more importantly, once the strategies are developed and implemented, just asking the question, is what we're doing actually working?
Mm-hmm.
And that's been a bit of a concern that I've had through the years related to both reach and spiritual formation strategies in churches. I think more so for the reach strategies, because it would not be uncommon for me to ask a church, what is your reach strategy? And they might rattle off, well, we're doing things in the community. We're encouraging people to invest and invite. We're intentional about our weekend services. We're engaging digital strategy. But then I ask the question, are you actually seeing new people coming to the church? And many times they don't know the answer to that,
Mm-hmm.
or they don't know if there are new people that are engaging. And so I love the fact that you're kind of going back to the foundation of, let's ask those key questions that we should be processing as a ministry. Let's design the strategy, but let's also be honest whether or not the strategy is actually working.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Tony,
Absolutely.
that was a great segue because I think we talk a lot about the need for churches who want to have healthy growth to have both a reach strategy and a discipleship strategy or spiritual formation. Tiffany, can you unpack where digital strategy fits into that conversation on both the reach and the discipleship side?
Sure. Yeah, we should think of it as a tool in the toolbox for both. But if you have to prioritize one over the other, prioritize reach. I think discipleship happens best in the context of relationships, and chances are you already have mechanisms for developing relationships and discipling people. Most churches do. So it's not that you couldn't use digital to improve those or to continue to better and get better in discipleship. I just think it's the other side where we've got the biggest upside.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking of a few tips for how you can, if you're focused on reach, how you can use digital strategies to reach new people. And baseline, first things first, you've got to pick an audience, and name the personas. Get really specific. It's like we talk all the time about churches having a strategy. It's not that you're saying we're not going to reach anybody else, but especially in digital, if you haven't identified who you're speaking to, you're just going to vomit all over everybody with something that's
Right.
not really helpful. Um, so you need to get really specific. And then once you've got that audience in mind, who you're creating digital content for, then start asking, okay, what are the right strategies to reach those people? So then you're picking the right channel and you're picking the right kinds of content that will help you reach those people. The third thing I would say is think local. I think people tend to downplay or miss the fact that, especially social media, is very effective at helping you discover who is right around you, um, to build connections right around you. And if you forget that, then you start designing content just for eyeballs. And as a local church, God put you where you are on purpose. Yeah, you already have a built-in community right where you are. I think that social media in particular is such a great place to show how your church is for your community and to celebrate and be part of the community online. Fourth, know what you're trying to accomplish. This is kind of what we said earlier, but your win doesn't have to be any other church's win, and that's 100% okay. Set some objectives you can say very clearly, we met the objective or we didn't. So maybe it's, how many new people did we connect with on social media that then we were able to find out later they attended a service or that they joined a group. Or maybe it's we want to be for our community. How many new connections can we form with people who are serving our community well in an area of passion and mission for our church? I guess my point is that you don't have to just take the default wins that the social media platforms give you, especially things like vanity metrics like likes and follows. You can set a different objective and use the tools to accomplish it. Okay, number 5, don't put insider messages in outsider spaces. This is my biggest pet peeve when I look at what churches are doing on social media and on their websites. I think you've got to filter everything you're doing through the lens of your mission field, especially if you're trying to use digital for reach. I think this comes down to language a lot. So I'll see churches talking about how they are going to win everybody in their community for Jesus, or that their mission is to reach the lost and save them. And they're putting that out there in front of the people they consider lost in need of saving, or the people, so it's about language. If you filter everything you're posting through, would I say this to a person that I'm trying to reach and lead towards? And they're just not. You just need to define what are our insider spaces and what are our outsider spaces, and then be really intentional about staying in those lanes. Related to that, I'd say my next thought is that you can equip your insiders to share the outsider content. And I think this is a great way to monitor and evaluate how you're doing with your outsider content. So if you think we've got some great content, some great videos, or some great blog posts, or whatever format you're doing, this is really designed to reach that persona in our community. And then we're going to equip our people to share it, and they don't, I think that that's a pretty good indication that the content's not actually going to resonate with the people that they know or the people in their lives. 2 more. Have one person on your team who oversees the alignment of your digital strategy to ministry strategy across all ministry areas. So I think that you've got to have one person that keeps all your leaders on the same page about the digital strategies you've decided on, how they're going to be used, and how you'll measure wins. Otherwise, you'll have the kids ministry doing one thing and the student ministry doing another thing and the women's ministry, and you'll have people using email here, and there'll be 3 different Facebook pages. And if the goal is that digital is just a tool in the toolbox for your overall ministry strategy, somebody's got to own alignment amongst everything your church is putting out online. And then last, this is just the reality of what this is. You have to try, evaluate, double down or abandon and repeat. I mean, everything is testing. Everything is, we think this is going to work. Let's put it out there. It worked or it didn't work. If it worked, let's do it again. If it didn't work, let's not. Let's move. And so you have to have a high tolerance for both failure and for testing new ideas. One example from us internally, we've been doing Unstuck webinars for years. They continue to be effective. We see lots of new people discover us through webinars. We see lots of people take next steps because of webinars. We get great feedback. We get great engagement. We've been doing it a long time. It's still working. We're going to keep doing them. They're free. People ask us for the replay. Like we see all these metrics of this is serving our audience really well. We tried master classes for a while. Not saying we won't ever do one again, but we put a lot of time and investment into them. Sometimes they seemed like people were engaged. Sometimes it seemed like people weren't. So we put a pause on that for the moment. I think this is just an area where you have to be willing to say, we tried it, it worked. Or we tried it, it worked pretty well, but we could get better, and just keep trying and repeating and evaluating.